Wargroove is the kind of strategy game where you often have two options. You could play smart and slow, use your units from tactical positions, slowly push your advantage, or recruit dozens upon dozens of cheap, poorly equipped infantrymen and knowingly march them to their death, slowly overwhelming the enemy with your sheer force. This is the core appeal of Wargroove. For those of you that were a fan of a certain tactical turn-based strategy game series that was popular on the Game Boy Advance, this game may look suspiciously similar to you, and that's because this game is literally Advance Wars. Yeah, I mean literally. I mean, look at it. Come on, look at it. The terrain works the same way. Movement works the same way. Vision works the same way. Unit HP and the fact that units lose attack power as they lose HP, that's the same. It's the same. Okay? And normally, when a game borrows such a high amount of content and concept from a different game, we would call that stealing or lazy game design. But not here. Oh no, not with Wargroove, okay? Because while Wargroove does copy the tactical mechanics of Advance Wars, it does add a whole bunch of new stuff. Commanders actually have a battlefield presence in the form of a unit with a special ability, which is kind of like hero units from RTS games in a lot of ways. And there's also some other minor adjustments, interesting units, and a story that's not half bad. And also, a big reason why I don't mind Wargroove shamelessly using the building blocks of Advance Wars is because Advance Wars was a great game series, but it's been dead for well over a decade, just like all my favorite games. So, I don't know, is it really stealing if a modern version of this game doesn't exist? I don't think so. I think this is the modern version of that game, really, even if it is by a different developer. So, you know, anything that can be a spiritual successor is going to be a good game in my book. And this is definitely that. The tactical elements present here are fairly simple, but contain enough nuance to make a game that feels complex, but not boring. There isn't much in the way of resource management. Most of the strategy involves unit positioning and choosing when to attack with what unit, as the units have kind of a rock, paper, scissors system of strengths and weaknesses where one unit counters another, which counters another. It's really easy to pick up, but still deep enough to provide good challenge. Also, the graphics and animation are very Game Boy Advance feeling, but of course they're sharpened, they're scaled up and brightened and polished for a more modern look. Wargroove does definitely scratch the Advance Wars itch, but in a lot of ways it goes beyond that too. The devs put a nice little codex into the game which describes characters' lore, units and their abilities and tactics for them. And I'm not going to tell you that the story and the lore is like super amazing, but you know what, it's pretty good, it's good enough. And the codex really is a nice touch. I think it adds just a little bit more content to the game. It's nice. But one of the things that I think is nice about this game is, see, with a lot of strategy games, especially ones that are multiplayer focused, like this one definitely is, a lot of times the campaigns kind of suck. They're just really easy or just not too good. The campaign in this game, in my opinion, is quite good, and it doesn't pull punches. The default setting is hard, and while a lot of missions are not hard, there are some that definitely do live up to that name. Of course, the game starts out by throwing softballs at you with these easy tutorial missions, but they turn up the heat a little bit later on. In the first mission of Act 2, things took kind of a strange turn where I was tasked with removing the local populace. I could have done this by simply destroying their village, a relatively easy task. But then, as I was planning my moves, the locals made one fatal mistake. They started one-shotting my archers. They would appear quickly from the fog, striking swift before disappearing again into their homeland. Their guerrilla tactics were brutal, fierce, and they were hard to counter. I could hear them in the trees, speaking foreign tongues, and I was pissed. We lost those sweet, innocent archer units, it was just too much for me. I wanted blood. I had to kill that enemy commander now. I had no choice. I had to. And from that point forward, I put all my manpower into killing their commander. It wasn't easy, of course. This was not my land. The map was covered in dense fog, and the enemy commander had a very high movement speed, so every time I would catch sight of them, they would vanish deeper and deeper into the jungle. But finally, many turns later, after recruiting more cheap, unsuspecting soldiers to use as bait, and after this bastard hid from me for months in remote mountainous regions, much like Osama bin Laden in the 2000s, I was finally able to catch him. But see this was not going to be good. Oh, there would be no quarter. There would be no quick death. And no burial at sea for this one. Oh no, this was personal. I whittled that guy away, slowly, until he finally succumbed. My victory carried a high monetary cost, and I sustained heavy casualties romping around the jungle, pouring all my resources into this manhunt, leaving my front line vulnerable to their units. Many men lost their lives on this mission. Could I have just destroyed their compound and ended the game 8 turns earlier? Yes, I could have. But the game's mission, that was no longer relevant to me. I had my own mission, and I completed it. I took down the man himself. Was it worth it? Yes. Because I, the commander of all these deceased soldiers, am not held responsible for their deaths. They were just defending their country. It was noble and patriotic, and it was worth it. Okay, but all memes aside, this is a pretty great little strategy game. It's really simple to pick up, yet has a great amount of depth, and I do highly recommend it. But before I give you my final score, I do want to note that there are some negatives that I do think hold the game back a bit, alright? First of all, Wargroove commits the gaming cardinal sin of having unskippable cutscenes. Sure, that intro cutscene, which I think is pretty cool, you can skip that in kind of a weird way by holding down the mouse, the left click for several seconds, which is weird, but whatever. But every mission in the main story has a cutscene that's basically a conversation between two characters, and this cannot be skipped, only sped up. And that kind of pisses me off. Sure, like, okay, it's only 30 seconds, sure, but when you're on a tough mission and you gotta replay it a few times, it really starts to get annoying to watch that same damn cutscene every time. And my second point is that this game doesn't have saves within missions. They do have this rather archaic checkpoint kind of system, where I guess you can make a checkpoint and then come back to it later somehow. I still really haven't figured out how the checkpoint actually works, because you can press save checkpoint, but as far as I can tell, there is no load checkpoint, so okay. And you can suspend a game too, so you can quit and come back to it later and be at the same spot. But there's no real actual save state. For example, I can't just save a game on turn 4 and then load to it later if I mess up. I can't do that. No, if I mess up, I have to start from the very beginning of the mission and watch the damn cutscene again. And, you know, these missions can easily take half an hour to an hour, depending on how many turns it takes, and if you feel like you're getting close to it, and then you mess up and make a wrong move, and you're like, well, now I have to start over. You know, I could have, if they would have let me, I could have made a save like 3 turns ago, and then reversed this, but they don't, so now you have to spend another half an hour getting back to where you were. My final gripe involves the way that the missions are structured. You see, the enemy AI is actually pretty dumb, and the way that the developers create difficulty is usually by giving the enemy more income or recruitment buildings to kind of tip the odds a little bit. That's fine, but there's some missions that involve time-gated triggers, meaning that something will happen on turn 3 or turn 5 or whatever, and whatever it is can sometimes end up throwing a wrench in your plan, and if you're badly positioned for whatever happened, you might even have to start the game over again. For example, there's one mission where you fight against waves and waves of enemies. But here's the thing. When you start it, you don't know how many waves there are, you don't know what kind of enemies are coming at you, and because this game has a kind of rock, paper, scissors system, you won't really know that first game what units to pick or not, so you kind of have to throw that first game away just figuring out exactly what's coming at you. In fact, you might have to throw a few games away to actually see every wave of enemy come out and then devise a strategy. And the other thing that's a little bit unfortunate is sometimes with this game, the best strategy, like I said at the beginning, is to just recruit a bunch of cheap units like pikemen and just cheese with it, basically, which is not something I really like in my strategy games, but it's not the end of the world, I suppose. Once again, this is kind of frustrating, especially the thing with the missions, causing you to start over. So these things definitely knock off a couple of points from what is otherwise, I think, a really great game. However, even with that, overall, I still do recommend this game, especially if you liked Advance Wars. There's some frustrating bits, there's some things that kind of suck, but the overall experience is very good. This game plays very nice. I think the balance is fairly good for the most part. Overall, I rate Wargroove an 8 out of 10.